was called the Jazz, oh, JC. It was like the Intercollegiate Jazz Festival. They called that. It was like the IAJE. But it was the first festival. It was in Miami. It was one of the very first. And so this band did a clinic, and we had Phil Woods, Gary McFarlane, and Stan Kenton were all listening to the band on a Saturday morning. And it happened to be the morning of the Alan Rock, the jazz DJ who became Bozo the Clown later, recently died, wonderful man. Wouldn't let me play a solo. I got one solo because we had Mark Colby and Bill Pierce, and they were all seniors. And I was just like a freshman in high school. Duffy and I were the youngest guys in the band. So, but on the morning of the clinic, it was the day of the college boards. And so Mark couldn't make it. None of those guys could do it. And I ended up playing lead alto, which I was the worst reader in the band. But Ira Sullivan, who couldn't read, taught me to read. The best way to read is if you're playing third alto, just listen to the lead alto player's rhythms and play your notes. You don't have trouble reading the notes. You have trouble reading rhythms. That's right. If you well, it's the rhythms that are going to mess you up. So I knew all the rhythms. So I could just change the notes and play lead alto, no problem. And so Phil really, and I could play blues in F. And there was one tune, Poor Devil Blues. And I knew about 60 Charlie Parker phrases on the blues. And that was pretty much, I would then improvise my own based on what he did, which I'm still doing. And Phil heard me and said he had this camp in Pennsylvania, and he wanted to give me. I had no money. My family was, was poor. We were poor Jews, which is really unusual. In fact, Clifford Jordan one time, I told him some story about. He said, "Oh, you grew up in Miami. Your daddy owned a hotel down there?" And I said, "Oh, come on, Clifford. Man, did you have your watermelon today? Come on, man. We don't, you think every Jew you meet is like got a lot of money and this and that. That's ridiculous." I said, "As a matter of fact, we didn't have money and we were very poor. We got evicted a lot. And my life was just pretty, pretty tragic and sad and poor." And he said, "Well, that's good." He thought about it for a second. And he says, "Well, that's good for you. That's good." I said, "What do you mean it's good?" He said, "Well, had your daddy owned a hotel, you'd be playing like."
I was about to say that too. Going through those rough times teaches you the blues and all sorts of stuff. I mean, you don't get the blues living the good life. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So that is what happened. But anyway, in answer to your question, because I want to talk about you, the thing is, when I got to Phil's camp, the first lesson that Phil gave us was that lesson, the Dorian mode. Usually I have my horn next to me, and because of my tracheostomy, I can't sing anymore. But it was a Dorian mode from D to E, da 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 da, and then the Crimea River lick coming down, ooh doo doo da da da.
Right.
Down
That's what I got too.
That was that exercise, and I learned that in all the keys, and I realized there are numbers to this. And I had an idea of that because my dad taught me solfeggio when I was a little boy. I already played piano somewhat, and this and that, and I played the guitar. But it all came together when I learned that little exercise.
Right.
It was like a Zen koan. That thing was all of a sudden, I saw the light, and you had the same realization. Isn't that funny? We both had that kind of awareness from that one exercise.
That's right.
It went up to the ninth and down the arpeggio. And then I realized that's all that ever goes on.
It was an eye-opening experience for me, and then I got the book Patterns for Jazz at Pitt, which doesn't write out stuff for you. It just tells you the numbers of the notes, right? 1, 2, 3, 5, 1, 3, 2, 5, stuff like that. And it all started to make sense. Like it was like the world opened up while I'm sitting in this room. I was pretty high, of course, sitting in this room, and it suddenly it's like,
I was high too. And the second thing that opened it up for me is Phil gave me a present. Phil said, like right after I learned that exercise, about a week or two later, he said he would spend extra time with me. He told me I could be a very good alto player. I said, be a good alto player someday if I learned to keep my mouth shut. And but he gave me Oliver's patterns, which was called Patterns for Saxophone, one of the original copies of it.
Wow.
Oliver had given a few extra copies, and he gave me one. He gifted me with one, and he told me the best thing about it was it didn't tell you what the changes were. He said you have to figure out what the numbers are and what kind of changes it would fit over. He said that's the way Oliver was so hip that he knew to do that. He didn't spoon feed you anything. You got to figure out where that stuff goes. And so like that was your second thing. First was the Dorian mode to the ninth and down the arpeggio. Second thing, patterns for jazz. And Phil said, now you don't want to just play this stuff, but you want to use it as a tool to learn things from. And so it's interesting that you and I both had that those two very same things at the beginning. And so then that became my way of, then I got fascinated with the piano, and I would just start playing standards and just keep learning piano. But I had the same breakthrough that you had. I thought of the numbers.
I started transcribing Charlie Parker solos too because after my second year I went back to Pittsburgh and I changed to a kind of a music major, if you will, but there was only one jazz teacher, Dr. Nathan Davis. They didn't really have a jazz department. Jerry Allen was in school when I was there, and Jothan Collins and James Johnson, all these people that knew a lot of stuff. But what I started to try to do was like you were saying, I tried to transcribe some Charlie Parker solos by ears, and it took some time for me, but it got better slowly. So I went to the jazz improvisation class with Nathan Davis, and he was playing an F blues, right? I just never forgot this. And he's having people play. And so I played the first chorus of what I had learned off it. Maybe it was Now's the Time or one of those tunes, but up, or whatever one solo it is. And then he started yelling at me, play your own solo. And I said, I don't have an own solo. I don't know what to play.
Yeah, right.
What do you mean play my own solo? What are you talking about?
That's great, man. Yeah, I mean, that was the Charlie Parker. They had also singing them, right? I bet you sang a lot.
I did. I got a good story for it. I hate to interrupt you, but I got this story. So I had learned I call it the big birdie lick. When he plays going to the what is it, bar 8 to 9, 10, yeah, bar 8 where he goes ba ba da ba da ba da ba da, ba ba da ba da ba do ba da bo do be dee ba, all that, right? Ba ba da ba da ba da ba da.
Up to diminished, yeah, like
yeah, it's the 3/6 chord where he jumps from the third to the flat 9, right?
Yeah, in the key of F, it's the D sharp to the C.
D sharp to the C. So I learned that lick in all 12 keys. But I'm downstairs with my buddy, right? A buddy who was going to music school and eventually went to study with I can't remember his name. Famous arranger up in Connecticut. Can't remember his name. So he was telling me I have trouble with these intervals, and I said, well, like which ones? He said, like the flat 9. I said, man, it's the big birdie lick. It's the big birdie lick. And so I said, just listen to the solo. Da 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 da. And he couldn't hear it. He's like, what do you mean? What do you mean? What do you mean? He never forgot because at one point I'm yelling at him, bro, just listen to what Charlie Parker is playing. Don't think about it. Just listen to it and sing it.
Yeah.
It took a while, but he got it. He still remembers that story this day when I'm down in the pit practice room. Come on, man, just listen and sing. Don't think.
Yeah, well, that was it. I mean, that and that's what. That was the thing. When you learn not to think, you just say, "Oh, they're colors." That's what the next thing that Phil showed us actually was shown to us by Norm Grossman who was a percussionist who taught theory at the camp, and he knew a lot, and he did it very well. And Phil reinforced it because I would always bring everything to Phil, and he would straighten me out. Everything is made of elements. In other words, every phrase has an anatomy, just like every dish has a recipe that you eat, and every part of the body has some physics involved with it, has some things. So, for instance, you know, be-ba-da-ba-do-dee-doo-doo-da, that's got a scale. It's coming down a scale, and then it jumps to an upper structure note, which is another element, which is the flat nine, and it hits a third, and it goes from the third, which is what they call a butter note, or a note that's a third or seventh. So it's a target. It hits a target. It's down the scale to the target of the third, up to the next target, which is the flat nine, and that's the story of that phrase.
Right.
And so Phil said every phrase has a story to it. And so when you're learning these things, understand what the story is, and then improvise around the story.
Improvise around the story.
You don't have to play Bird's notes anymore if you can, if you want to, but you got freedom now because you understand what he was doing. What he went down the scale to a target and up to a flat nine, and that's the color of a flat nine from the third. And you know, and so then Phil, that was the next thing, and after that we kind of, you know, Roger Rosenberg and Mike Brecker, we all learned the same way from Phil. That way.
Phil was such a monster teacher for so many of us. Even if we didn't directly study with him, we got some information from others who did. And what I discovered later, because I in high school I had the Close book, the 25. You remember all the classical training, the saxophone,
oh, man.
25. And I found the Charlie Parker licks in there. I found several times it went from the third to the flat nine, you know, or he would spell the diminished chord over it. And I found C sharp to B flat, you know, da 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 dum 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 da 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 da. And I was like, oh my God, it's all right here.
Well, you know, I had another teacher who had me do the Close, the 25 exercises. Daily studies.
Yeah.
And we didn't do all of them, but he had me transpose them to different keys.
Wow.
So you'd figure out what key it started. If it started da 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 da, you know, dee da 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 dee da 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 dee da 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 dee da 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 dee da da dee da. That one, you know, and then you say, well, that's in C in here. Well, now let me try it in C sharp. So I would have to. Gordon Brisker was the name of this teacher.
Wow.
And, you know, I lived a few months in Cincinnati and he was my teacher there. And, you know, just doing those Close exercises in different keys was just phenomenal it really helped me understand music a lot better. And that's I found amazing. Those birthdays. Yeah. You know, that was, like somebody said, how do you develop technique? And I said, basically I did three things, you know. And that was one of them. You know,
wow, that's difficult to do, to tell you the truth. You
got to really know what you learn from it. You learn to practice slowly.
You know what I tried to do once, and it worked. During COVID, I was making those videos for Instagram just to be entertaining, you know. So I put like a drum beat, a swing drum beat, and I played, maybe it was Close number 23 or something. I don't remember which one it was. And it works, you know, it works if you swing it, you know.
Oh, it does. And you learn you know what else you learn from that? That you don't have to bounce your eighth notes.
Right.
You sound terribly corny if you go da 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 dee dee da da. But if you go dee da do da do dee do da do da da, then it's bebop. Close is like, you know, it's because I tell when people come to me and they're studying and they're playing like Bach, I know they're playing like one person came to me and she went and I said, you played saxophone for quite a while, I can tell that. Well, would you play Bach like oh, I see what you mean. I said, it'll swing itself. You don't have to.
I used to tell my students, I don't have a lot, but I used to tell them, please don't try to play jazzy. That's just not right. Just don't do
Yeah,
that.
like jazzy is a terrible word.
It's
You know,
like, oh my God,
yeah,
please,
jazzy.
no, no. And honestly, Bob, and there's so many cultures in the world, that's what they try to do. It's like that. For my experience here in Japan, people just can't seem to understand how much classical music I studied because they get confused because they've pigeonholed me. You're a jazz player. I'm like, no, I'm a musician. I study music, and then I teach them the stories about how much classical music Charlie Parker studied and how much he loved it and how he listened to it at home and how dizzy and he used to analyze scores and analyze Bach.
Yeah,
What do you call them? What do you call the bass notes? All of that stuff on the scores and stuff. And it's just, I
bigger,
find so many cultures don't understand that jazz is a blending of European music and a new rhythm in America and a new language.
yeah, that's what it is now. Here's some funny. Here's another. Actually, I have a stereotype story that involves your buddy, your teacher Nathan Davis.
Oh, Nathan Davis.
Yeah, you'll love this stuff. This is actually something that happened to me. I was in Italy, and might have been Switzerland, well, somewhere. And when I got to the train station, I saw posters. I was giving a concert that night or the next night, and I saw these pictures saying Bob Mover concert, and there was a picture of this black tenor player, a black guy with this, smiling black face on the poster. And it said Bob Mover concert tomorrow night, 9 o'clock, Town Hall, such and such. When I got to the office and I said, what's with this photo? They said, you're not Bob Mover. I said, no, I am Bob Mover. This is not Bob Mover. I said, your poster is not him. They said, oh no. They said, we had 2 jazz concerts this summer. It's a comune thing. That's right, we have different kinds of music every week. And in the course of the summer, we have 2 jazz concerts. So you are one, and Nathan Davis is the other. And we just somehow, they both got out of the envelopes, and we didn't remember whose was whose. And we just figured that Bob Mover was much more of a black name than Nathan Davis. So that's,
My man Nathan. Yeah, honestly, Nathan was more of a vibe player. He wasn't a chord change player, if you know what I mean. He played vibes and that kind of. What I mean, this is a subject which I posted on Facebook recently, which upsets a lot of people. When I made a comment that I said, I don't think white musicians have gotten the credit they deserved. I didn't mean they didn't make the money they deserved. Clearly, I think a lot of white musicians made a lot more money, like Benny Goodman. I'm not stupid, you know what I mean?
oh,
But
yeah,
what, but, but what I meant was clearly like listening to Jerry Mulligan and all of the Artie Shaw and the mixing of the cultures. And when I used to hang out with brothers, a lot of them used to say, "Oh, white players can't swing, white players can't do this," and I listened to it myself. I was like, "Well, that don't make no sense." Because I'm listening to Jerry Mulligan, I'm thinking, man, I'm tapping my feet and I feel like dancing. This shit is killing. So I meant something which some people messaged me privately about it, and some black people were really upset about it, and I know why. But I think these are the topics in America that we should be talking about. We should talk about the cultures and why are we upset about these types of discussions.
yeah, I mean, there are, yeah, I think that there are certain things that maybe white people bring to the music that are a little bit different than black people. I mean, there are qualities sometimes in the music that's slightly different, but still the same values are there.
Right.
Like Zoot Sims has the same values as Sonny Rollins.
Right.
There's some quality, maybe the Lester Young influence And though Lester Young sounds, sounds,
He sounds like Frankie Trambauer to me.
yeah, right, like well, next to Coleman Hawkins. Yeah, I mean, I don't think music has color. I think, but
It does have culture though. There are different cultures. I think.
yeah, there was a certain kind of West Coast jazz that I found that was like light and airy, and didn't really have the what Phil used to call gonads
Right.
of our darker brethren. Uh, and, and Phil said that one day.
That's good, man.
Yeah, he was talking about the difference between black and white. He said, yes, well, some of the white guys don't play with the gonads of our darker brethren.
Man, I had Phil Wood's number, but I was afraid to call him. I wish I had called him for some lessons, man. I was just kind of scared to.
Yeah, well, he if he wasn't drunk, he was great. And,
Right.
he did some regrettable things. Sometimes if he drank too much, he was not the nicest guy in the world. But generally, that was most of the time he was cool.
I, I got to hear Phil play live. My mother bought me a saxophone that he turned down in 1978. A late, I sold it, unfortunately. I should have kept it. A late 50s Selmer Mark VI, right? And then I went to go see Phil play in the Poconos. I never forgot the experience of it. I did not, Bob, I had no idea what he was doing musically, but I knew I liked it. It was in a little club in the Poconos. And the first thing he said was to the audience, "We're not going to use any microphones because I want to play music that makes you lean forward a little bit. I don't want you to play music where you have to lean back in your seat." And that comment hit me really hard. But I never forgot how what's the level of playing of the band and his playing and sound just hit me like a roar of understanding. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. He could. Yeah, well, I mean, he had a very intense swing, and he. He. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what to say about that. I mean, that's just true. It was just there. Like he wants to make you to lay back and not to lean forward right into it as
Right.
opposed to away from it. He
He
wants,
didn't want it to be loud in your face, he said. He didn't want you to have to, he didn't want to play loud with microphones. He wanted you to lean forward a little bit. He said, so you have to, you know. I knew what he meant. It was a spiritual thing almost and an auditory thing. And then of course I transcribed Phil solos and wrote them out later. And I had friends that studied with Phil told me stuff. I met Phil on the road with Basie. We played the Hollywood Bowl and he was there, and I saw him other places. And he was always so wonderful. I remember even towards the end of his career, we played the Hollywood Bowl, and you remember he had the oxygen tank at that time. Remember that?
oh yeah.
And man, when he put down the tank. And Bobby played his ass off. I mean, I was just like, wow, this man's having trouble breathing. But when he picked up the horn, it's just stunning.
Yeah, well, the spirit can come down sometimes. That's been happening with me too. I got this tracheostomy, and yet until very recently, the air is not quite as strong. But
Mm.
I still have days when it's good. Most days, actually, I'm all right. I can still, play long lines, and you wouldn't know that I had the
Right.
scuffling that I'm doing, And Phil was an inspiration that way. Of course, he was the reason I started smoking. Uh, he looked so cool when he was
Right.
conducting our band and saying, "Well, you see, cats, it measures 72. Hold the note a little longer." And it just looked so cool with his true cigarettes. They were
And how
called
many how
true.
many years did you smoke cigarettes?
Oh man, 45 years.
Oh, geez. Bro, I made a decision in 1993. I quit smoking anything that I was smoking, and I was smoking a couple of things, but I quit cigarettes and the other substance in 1993. I went cold turkey on both of them. And it was like a year of a nightmare, but I made it. You know what I mean?
Well, I did that 7 years ago now. I just decided to stop smoking everything because if I smoked any pot, I wanted to smoke cigarettes.
Right, right.
And then I quit drinking on top of it too. And I wasn't an alcoholic. I mean, I could drink sometimes, but I drank because when I drink, I'd want to smoke. So then just better to give it all up, you know?
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I wanted to talk about my experience with the Count Basie Orchestra and the big bands, which I think is missing from all the youth today have amazing technique, but I'm not enjoying the music. I'm not enjoying what they're doing. They're not, as Bill Crow told me when I was home and I asked him, I played him, and I don't want to mention the person's name because I don't want to get into that. I played him a young player, has a massive amount of technique. And Bill Crow, I went to his house, we spent 3 hours together, and it didn't take long, Bill to go say, I don't like that at all. That's what he said. I said, oh, well, why? He really can play his horn. He said, but he's not very generous with the audience. It just sounds like he's showing off, and his tone is kind of whiny. I don't like it a bit. It's like,
Oh yeah, I can hear Bill saying that. Well, the showing off aspect is real strong in a lot of cats these days. I hear that in some of the young people. It's not like they're not really playing from their heart with humor or romance. And sometimes I really feel that a lot of it to some of these guys. I heard a guy like that last week too, a young guy who I won't mention his name either, but he used to study with me, and he's considered to be good by some people, and I can't. I find him unlistenable. That yeah, there's no sense of space. There's no sense of a story. There's not that. The cats also, I was going to mention the big bands with you because, one guy that I really was influenced by, and I didn't get to play with him a lot, but I think he's another common influence that you and I have. And I used to go to these sessions when I was a teenager, and these guys would be playing at these little clubs on 23rd Street, and you'd have people like Bob Thoreau would sit in, and John Bunch would sometimes play piano, a drummer named Maurice Mark. Oh, Bill Crow would play there sometimes. And but Carmen Leggio would come in.
oh, Carmen, yeah,
He was a monster. But
yeah.
Danny Turner would kill me. I mean, he was so beautiful. This cat would play jazz, and I never got to hear him. I don't think he made many records, if any, of his own. No. And he was on Basie's band at that time. And I didn't even get to hear him with Basie's band. But he'd come in sometimes with Joe Newman.
Right, right.
And he'd play at these sessions. And he was like just right somewhere in between Benny Carter and Bird and himself. I mean,
I agree. Bob, I was so fortunate to go to the school of Count Basie when but the story is I had been practicing a lot, as I told you, when I started studying with George Coleman, by the way, which really helped me a lot because George helped me break it down even more because I was trying to play a little outside the music or trying to play modern, and some of it was BS, Bob. I'm trying to say something. I didn't know what I was doing. And my very first lesson, George had me play something. And then he stopped, and people don't understand what he meant. He looked at me and said, Marshall, why'd you play that B right there? Why did you play the B? He knew what it was. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, the B is not part of the chord. Why did you play the B? And so, and I started, and finally he said, Marshall, you just can't play anything. And I knew what he meant, because I thought I was trying to be hip or something, but I didn't know what I was playing. And his lessons showed me that the method, like you've been talking about, of playing over the chord changes and taking your time and understanding why, like Phil Woods would talk about. Now, I was going to say I was practicing a lot, so I had transcribed giant steps myself because I discovered reading it was useless. So I decided I don't know how many I did, 30 courses or something. I couldn't finish it, but I did enough to gather what was going on with train, and then I would practice that, and then I had an exercise book. So I had a gig with Sonny Costanzo's band, and Frank Foster was the what do you call it? The guest artist at the college. And I had been practicing this giant steps for like a year now, right? So he brought out his chart giant steps, and my book was the other solo. It was like him, and then you solo after him. So I was kind of ready because I'd been doing this giant stepping for like a year now, right? And I actually played pretty well, to tell you the truth. My friend said, "Well, I thought you sounded better than Frank, actually." And that's when he hired me as a sub to play with Basie. Now I couldn't play the same way as those guys, but on the band was Danny Turner, Kenny Hing, John Williams. I think Melton Mustafa will come back. The cats were still there. In other words, the trombone played Bill Hughes, and I remember sitting beside Danny Turner for a long time because Frank told me one day, he said, "Well, I know you can read fly shit, so I'm going to get you back in here." That's the way he put it. So I'm sitting beside, I got to play four different chairs, first tenor, second alto, three chairs, and the other tenor chair. So I'm sitting beside Danny for long tours. We went to Japan, we went to Finland and a bunch of stuff. And he just kind of got into my head, man. I liked his soloing. I asked him a lot about lead alto, and he said, "Well, we all learn by listening to the alto player before." So for my case, I listened to Bobby Plater a lot.
Yeah.
And Bobby listened to Marshall a lot. So he said, we've passed down this language for
I guess
generations.
or Warren.
Earl Warren. He said, we've passed this language down from player to player in this band because people stay in this band, he told me, a long time, And so I started learning from listening to the way they were phrasing and listening to Danny.
Yeah.
Now as you know, I was always a good reader, which helped me. So I was always put on lead alto because I could read very well, and I could sight read very well. So as Nathan Davis said, you remember Nathan didn't really teach a lot of chord playing and what to play for chords, but I wanted to become a good lead alto player. I always wanted to be that. It was one of my goals and one of my dreams. And when you play lead alto, you not only reading it, you have to learn how to emote and put the emotion into the band and into like Lionel Hampton said once to Mark Gross, because Mark Gross once said, Mark Gross, the great alto player, we were all in Lionel Hampton's band, and Mark was playing lead alto, and Mark told Lionel, "Man, I really want to get some more solos." And Lionel looked at him, but Gates, you play lead alto, you soloing all night, Gates. and And Mark told me the story, and I got it because when you listen to the Basie band, if anyone goes to listen to the videos of the live Basie band when I'm playing lead alto, you hear me on top of the band all of the time. The lead alto and the lead trumpet kind of give the whole big band all of its flavor and everything. You know what I mean? And the lead alto just cuts right through everything. And whatever vibrato or slurpy parts I want to put into it, everyone is hearing it, and the rest of the band is following it.
Oh, definitely. I mean, that's that's why. Benny Carter to me is like the perfect lead alto player. It's just. Phil is a great lead alto player too, but just those early records with Benny Carter. To me, he was really the state of the art. Sort of like the Sugar Ray Robinson
Right.
of the alto, just so flawless with his lead, and also being the soloist he was too. But I think that Benny was something, and
Benny was amazing, and Benny. I wasn't in the band. Benny came back and played with the Basie band when Doug Lawrence was in the band, and I really learned a lot from Doug Lawrence, the tenor player, of how to play less notes and say more, if you know what I mean. I was really focused on notes, and it's not really about notes, is it, Bob? It's not about the notes, really. It's about how you play, how you phrase. You remember the other day when I asked you about some stuff to practice, you gave me some bebop scales and stuff like that. I wanted to get that finger thing together. But it's really the way you, Bob, play your phrase and the way you put it in there that makes it sound, well, like jazz, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, it wasn't really the scales. It was like the rhythmic emphasis on the scale is what I was talking about with them. I mean, like putting these little chromatic passages in the middle of the scale to avoid it sounding like a scale.
Right.
That kind of thing. But how the emphasis is all on the rhythm. It's really, if you've got the right rhythm behind it, then it sounds like jazz. Without the right rhythm, without it feeling right, then it's not gonna sound that way. I mean,
Did you learn a lot of that from playing with Chet Baker, or how did you? Where did that come from for you? When did it hit you? When did that hit you?
it was. I grew up hearing Ira Sullivan very constantly. Like I'd go hear Ira. So he had a steady gig at a club called the Rancher Lounge,
Hmm.
and he was working 6 nights a week at this club, and I was there at least 5 of them, and swords and I mean, well, I would sit in with him from the time I was about 17, but when I was 16, after I left Phil's camp, I'd only been playing a year and a half when I went to Phil's camp,
Wow.
and well, 2 years, well, not quite 2 years, but then I moved to New York when I was 16,
Hmm.
and I started to sit in. My friend Brooks Kerr and Brooks had also been at the camp, pianist. Brooks, blind piano player, very good friend of mine. We would go down, and I started studying with Richie Kamuka, and Richie was playing with Roy Eldridge, and they let me sit in with them, and I started to sit in with Zoot Sims and Al Cohn and James Moody, and so all those cats let me sit in with them,
Hmm.
and just out of fear of getting thrown off the bandstand. I mean, I learned to play out of fear. I mean, I just wanted to sound good enough that nobody would tell me to get the hell out of there. I mean,
Right. Right.
but also it was even more than that. It was just the love of the joy of playing that
Right.
these guys had so much fun. That was what got me. That was, I think, what did it. My daughter Emily was telling me last night. She said she was up in Toronto, and she said sometimes, Dad, these guys all play well, all these young cats, but you know what, Dad? They're not having any fun. They're not,
I
and
wrote a big blog about that, and I just rewrote it a little bit about that. To me, the dance, the joy, and the fun is missing out of music now, and I don't really like it, and I don't think people like it either.
yeah, me too. I mean, that's what I think when you mentioned that at the beginning of our interview today, or whatever it is, our conversation, that this young alto player, that Bill Crow was talking about something, that's the first thing that somebody like Bill would hear is that this cat's
He,
not
he
really,
was he was a tenor player. I don't want to give it away, but he was playing tenor.
yeah, well, whatever it was, he wasn't having fun. And I think that that's a very strong feeling. I hear people playing a lot of interesting things and this and that, but it's interesting. Like the Chinese curse me, you marry an interesting man.
Right, right, right.
You
I
know?
got, I got, I got a Bob Minter story, which kind of sums it up for me. And the way I learned was playing in the big bands, and the elders always giving me friendly advice or telling me something. And Bob Minter said when Buddy's band. He had one good story where he talked about that he had gone someplace to go hear a band, hear somebody play or something, and then I guess he got high or something and lost track of the time and had to run back to the band, and he was late, and he thought for sure he was fired. What I mean? He thought this was it, but he didn't fire him, but he did something that was funny to it. Buddy had to do something about it, but I think he said something to the audience or something. But Buddy, the short story is. Buddy came up to Bob once and said, you got all this Coltrane, you got all this, you're really deep into this Coltrane, but you need some of that Ben Webster and that Coleman Hawkins in your playing. And Bob said that changed his whole concept. And I bring that up because none of the young kids are getting to play first in big bands and learn what it's like to play with other people, to learn how to blend in a section, to learn that you have maybe 12 bars, 16 bars for your solo. And it's not about getting up there and playing a bunch of notes. You need to play something in context to what the band had just played, right?
Yeah.
You know, and uh, and you have to say it in a short amount of time. And then also people like Lionel Hampton used to say so many different learned things like to us about playing music. I find the kids today don't have that connection at all.
Well, I used to play club days with my father. My father's a trumpet player, and he also played the theremin. But my dad had this like basically a club date band.
Hmm.
Miami, he did like that kind of stuff, and I would, he had a very interesting philosophy of tempo. He said, you got to always be careful, be right, make sure whatever tune you're playing is the right tempo, and that he said our job as musicians is basically we want these couples to go home and make good love with each other.
He sounds just like my brother. My brother used to say stuff like that.
Like even if maybe they were fighting a little earlier in the night,
Right.
but and maybe he said, but the main thing is that our music is like medicine for the soul. You're gonna make those
Right.
dancers dance close and desire each other, and that's what music is for. So
That's so true. My brother told me a story and I never forgot it because I was interested in Eric Dolphy and all this different music and bebop and all this stuff. And he looked at me one day and said, because he played guitar and he played bass and he played piano and he would do gigs at clubs playing either of those instruments, or playing trumpet. He played trumpet with the George D. Big Band one night and wiped everybody out because his sound. The first thing my brother told me, he said to me, "What's the most important thing about your playing going to be, Marshall?" And he said, "It's going to be your sound. Your sound is what people." He said, "People have no idea what you're playing or what the notes mean, or if it was some hip Charlie Parker lick. They don't know that. All they know is your sound. If it's a pleasant sound to them, they might like it." So he said, "You should focus on that." The next thing he told me a story. He said, folks work really hard all week. Maybe they're working in a steel mill, maybe they're working down the street with the doctor's office. They've got no money. They're taking this woman, they're taking their wife or a girlfriend out on Friday night. They want to have a good time. They don't want to be lectured at and screamed at and have to listen. And he said if the woman isn't happy, the man's going to be very upset because he ain't going to get nothing that night. He said, when you go play at a club, you got to think about the people spent $15 to see you. That's a lot of money for them, you know?
that's right.